So the purpose of this video is to focus in on the specific uses of the Spec200, which is a spectrometer we're going to use in class this year. And instead of being sort of associated with a specific lab, I just wanted a general video that you guys could have to reference whenever you have to use this. And so I'm going to start off by just pointing out some important things about the setup, and then from there we'll go on to talk about the different options that you have in terms of measurements to take, so on and so forth. Remember that you always have the manual that was provided to you as well. That's pretty detailed and gives you a pretty good account of how to use this instrument. So I'll start off by pointing out there is a cuvette rack that's usually sort of hidden inside the compartments here on the in this case, the left-hand side of the spectrometer. We'll get to cuvettes a little bit later. In the middle, this is the main sort of thing that you're going to be focusing in on in terms of the controls. Down here, we have the main chamber, which contains the cuvette stand. And around back, we have the on-off button. So most of the procedures will start with like the general idea of plugging it in, turning it on, maybe letting it warm up for a bit, going through its initialization process, and then what you'll be left with is this home screen, right? Now, whenever you're manipulating anything on this home screen, or like the display in general, you're using these up and down arrows, left and right. When you want enter, you're using this button in the middle, right? And then when you want to make sort of drastic changes to the wavelength, instead of doing it incrementally, you'll use this knob and you'll turn it gently. The other buttons you need to be aware of is this is the auto zero button, which is going to help us blank our solutions. And then this is the home button, which kind of brings you back to this page, right? So what we're going to do is just kind of run through a simple acquiring of some data here. I think we'll do some measurements at various wavelengths and just kind of show you what that entire process would look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by looking at the menu, pressing enter. Now what you have is a bunch of different modes, okay? At the top, well, I shouldn't say mode, they're applications. You have a bunch of different applications that you can run through here, okay? So you have live display, multi-wavelength, which is the one that we're going to do just as an example, quant, which we won't actually need this semester, and scan. Scan's going to help us make a spectrum, right? So those are the options. Live display is like if you want to look at one single wavelength and what its absorbance is. This is if you want to look at multiple wavelengths and what their absorbances are. This we won't use, and this is for making a spectrum, scanning a bunch of wavelengths, a low to a high. So let's just say we want to measure, all right, the actual absorbance of a certain compound in an aqueous environment at different wavelengths. What we're going to do is turn left and right until we hit multi-lambda. Measurement mode, we want either absorbance or %T. We know that these two are related to each other. Let's just stick with absorbance because that's usually the more useful value because it's directly related to Beer's law. Hit down, hit go, and now you'll see that 4 different wavelengths will show up on the screen. It says to set the wavelength and then select go. The wavelengths are highlighted green. If I just press left and right, you'll see that they'll increment by 1. That's not as useful as incrementing by more using this lambda. So let's say that we wanted our first lambda, our first wavelength to be 400. I would set it to 499 and then use the left and right to set it more accurately. Let's highlight lambda 2 in green. Let's make it 450. So I'm going to go close to 450 and then increment low. Let's do 600 just for something different. Notice I'm turning gently. It's incrementing by 10. And let's do 750, something random. So the controls are pretty intuitive, but I do think it's helpful to kind of see somebody go through them just in general, right? So now, all right, I'm going to select go, all right? And what we see is it's starting to do some readings. Now, it's actually not ready to do accurate readings because we haven't blanked it, right? And we don't have our sample in the chamber, okay? So in the manual, you'll see some information about blanking. Make sure that you read that. We're gonna focus just on the mechanics of taking measurements here. So what I have here is a blank inside a cuvette. You see that one side of the cuvette has a triangle and the other sides do not. Those other sides are where you're going to handle it, and then you're going to put the triangle in the light path. Because this is an aqueous environment, I'm going to blank with water, and then what I'll do is at these 4 wavelengths, we'll take some measurements at, or with this blue sample here. So we'll take some absorbance measurements of this compound. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up the main chamber. I'm going to remember what sides of the cuvette I can handle this on, okay? Notice the triangle's there. I'm going to put the triangle, I'm going to put the triangle in the light path, right? The light runs from here to here, so it goes across this way. So I made sure, I don't know if I can get down in there, that the triangle, I guess you can't really see, oh yeah, there you can, that the triangle's in that light path, okay? Before this, because it was going to be difficult to do with just one hand, I did wipe these down with a Kim wipe. Just remember to make sure that you have that side that's going to be exposed to the light path clean. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to close the chamber. It's important to close the chamber so that the only light involved with the measurements is the light inside there that's actually being used by the spectrometer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this auto 0 button. Now whenever you hit auto 0, it'll say the same thing at the bottom, performing auto 0. And just say to yourself that's blanking it. It's going to take out all the effects of the surrounding aqueous environment from the sample that you're trying to analyze. And then unsurprisingly, what we get from the blank is 0 absorbance, and that's what we want. So now when we introduce our sample, the only absorbance that will be recorded is the actual absorbance of our sample itself, by itself, okay? You might get something that's close to 0. These might drift a little bit, but that's okay. When you're doing different measurements at different wavelengths or you're making different spectra, just remember that every time you're going to take a measurement, you're going to blank, all right? Before every single measurement, it's not too hard, it doesn't take too long of a time, you're going to blank. So I'm going to open this up. Now, try with one hand. Excuse me, sorry. Okay, and I'm going to remove the blank, remembering to grab it on the slightly foggy sides. Now again, I already used a Kim wipe on, I already used a Kim wipe on the cuvette that holds the blue sample. And put the blue sample in. I'm gonna make sure, yep, that the triangle is aligned with the light path. Good. I'm gonna close this. And now the nice thing about this spectrometer is it's doing the absorbance measurements automatically, okay? So we see they're not 0 anymore, and that's because there's something blue in there, and that blue thing is actually absorbing different wavelengths of light. Now for this particular mode of operation, there's only 4 different lambdas that we're monitoring, 400, 450, 600, 750. And what we see from this is 400, 450 is not really absorbing much at all. It's absorbing more than a blank, but really not an appreciable amount. 600, it's absorbing a bit, and then at 750, it's absorbing a lot. And then what you can do from here is make sense of those numbers, okay? And you'll do that in your lab. But like I said, I just wanted to kind of show you a general idea, or general process of going through making a measurement here.